Hey guys, welcome aboard a snoozy Voyager. Tonight we're drifting into one of history's strangest group activities. Not yoga, not Zumba, not that awkward office team building dance where nobody makes eye contact. I mean something far more committed, entirely involuntary, and possibly fatal. We're talking about the dancing plague of 1518, where hundreds of people in a quiet European town suddenly decided, or perhaps were compelled, to dance for days. And in some cases, until they collapsed from exhaustion. No music, no snacks, no water breaks, just pure, relentless movement. Like your legs signed a contract your brain never approved. So before your calves start cramping in sympathy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this strange little voyage we take together. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. There's something comforting about knowing someone else out there is also lying awake, wondering why medieval Europe occasionally turned into a very confusing dance floor. Now, dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that soft background hum, get comfortable and settle in. Let your shoulders drop, let your thoughts slow. And let me ask you something. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head so badly you thought you might lose your mind? Have you ever tapped your foot uncontrollably during a meeting and wondered if you were about to escalate into full choreography? Could you handle dancing for hours without food, water, or even a clear reason why? What would you do if your neighbours started spinning in the street like possessed marionettes? Would you join them, or quietly lock your door and pretend you were not home? And now, congratulations, you have just woken up in the city of Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. Your feet are already moving. Good luck. You wake up to the sound of commotion outside, not the usual gentle hum of carts or merchants, but something more rhythmic, more urgent. When you step into the street, you see a woman, alone, moving in a way that feels both deliberate and completely unhinged. Her name, you later learn, is Frau Trophia, and she is dancing, not elegantly, not joyfully, but relentlessly, as if her body has received instructions that her mind cannot override. You stand there, blinking, wondering if this is some kind of festival you forgot about, or perhaps the medieval version of a very public breakdown. The neighbours gather, whispering, judging, and yet not helping. Because at first it almost seems harmless, just a woman dancing in the street. People have done stranger things. But then the hours pass, and she does not stop. At first, you assume this is temporary. Maybe she's celebrating something. Maybe she lost a bet. Maybe this is what people did before hobbies were invented. You lean casually against a wooden post, trying to look like someone who understands what is happening, even though you absolutely do not. She spins. She steps. She stumbles slightly, but catches herself, then continues. You notice something unsettling almost immediately. There is no music, no rhythm that anyone else can hear, just the soft, as repetitive sound of her shoes scraping against the dusty street. It is the kind of sound that gets into your head, like a dripping faucet you cannot unhear. Someone near you mutters that she's been dancing since morning. You glance at the sun. It is now well past midday. Your brain tries to process this in a reasonable adult way. Perhaps she stopped earlier and resumed. Perhaps there were breaks. People need breaks. You need breaks just standing here. But no, she has not stopped. Her movements are not graceful. This is not a performance. This is not someone enjoying themselves. Her arms twitch slightly. Her steps uneven, like she's following instructions that are arriving late. There's a tension in her face, a tightness around her eyes, as if she is both fully present and completely trapped. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, Because suddenly, standing still feels like a decision, and you're not entirely sure you want to think about that. The crowd grows slowly, the way it always does when something strange refuses to resolve itself. People gather not because they understand, but because they hope that someone else does. You catch fragments of conversation. She must be possessed, or cursed, or just dramatic. There's a small, uncomfortable laugh from someone who immediately regrets it, because the longer you watch, the less funny it becomes. Time stretches, the shadows move, the heat settles into your clothes like an unwanted guest. And still, she dances. You realise something quietly terrifying. If this were normal, it would have stopped by now. If this were harmless, someone would have intervened. If this were voluntary, she would have chosen to rest, but she does not. And that is the moment the situation changes. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a subtle shift in your chest. Because what you are watching is no longer strange, it is wrong, and you cannot quite explain why, which is unfortunately how most terrible things begin. At first, you try to treat it like background noise, the way you might ignore a neighbour mowing the lawn too early on a Sunday. But this is different. The woman continues dancing through the heat, through the afternoon into the evening. Her movements grow more erratic, less controlled, like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by someone with questionable coordination. You notice the strain in her face, the sweat soaking her clothes, the way her breathing becomes ragged. And yet, she cannot stop. You shift your weight awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh, worry, or slowly back away. Because something about this does not feel like entertainment. It feels like a warning. You tell yourself to leave. This is not your problem. You have things to do, medieval responsibilities, bread to acquire, water to not drink too suspiciously, the usual. And yet, you stay. Because there is a strange gravity to this moment, the kind that pulls you in, even as every sensible part of your brain suggests you should be walking in the opposite direction. She's still dancing, hours later. You notice the details now, the way her feet land slightly off balance, the way her arms jerk instead of flow. This is not someone enjoying movement. This is someone enduring it. There is a difference. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Her breathing is louder now, and not in a dramatic way, but in a constant, uneven rhythm. Inhale, exhale, faster than it should be, too fast for something that has no clear purpose. You feel your own breathing adjust in response, which is not comforting. A man beside you folds his arms and watches with the intense focus of someone who has decided this is now his entire afternoon. Another woman shakes her head slowly, whispering a prayer under her breath. No one steps forward. No one says, maybe we should stop her. Because how exactly would you do that? Excuse me, could you not? It feels inadequate. You consider the possibility that this is some kind of illness. Something physical, something that makes the body move without permission. But if that were true, surely she would collapse. Surely there is a limit. You glance at her again. There is a limit. She's approaching it. Her movements are less coordinated now, more desperate. There is a slight tremor in her legs, a hesitation before each step, like her body is asking for permission to stop and being denied. You feel something uncomfortable settle in your stomach, because this is no longer about curiosity. This is about endurance, and she is losing. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the street. The light softens, but the scene does not. If anything, it becomes more surreal. The contrast between the calm evening and the relentless motion is unsettling. You realize something. If she dances through the night, then this is not a moment. This is something else. something that does not care about time or comfort or reason. You rub your arm slightly, even though it is still warm. Because a quiet thought has begun to form. What if stopping is not an option? And more importantly, what if this is not just happening to her? Naturally, more people gather, because nothing attracts a crowd like something deeply unsettling happening in broad daylight. You find yourself standing among them, exchanging glances with strangers who are all silently asking the same question. Is this normal? Some people cross themselves. Others speculate about spirits, curses, or perhaps just a very committed performance. No one quite agrees, but everyone agrees on one thing. They will continue watching. Because leaving would mean admitting that something is very, very wrong. You notice how quickly a crowd forms when no one knows what to do. It is almost comforting in a strange way. The presence of others creates the illusion that someone somewhere in this group must understand what is happening, but no one does. You can see it in their faces. Curiosity at first, then confusion, then something quieter, heavier. People shift closer, forming a loose circle around the dancer, as if proximity might somehow provide clarity. It does not. It only makes everything more immediate, more real. You're close enough now to hear the subtle sounds, the scuff of her shoes, the uneven rhythm of her breath, the faint, almost involuntary sound she makes when her body stumbles and recovers. It is not graceful. It is not controlled. It is not stopping. A man near you attempts to make a joke. Something about festivals. Something about enthusiasm. It lands poorly. No one laughs. He clears his throat and looks away, as if hoping the moment will reset. It does not. Someone else suggests possession. The word hangs in the air longer than it should. Possession. It is not a comfortable explanation, but it is an explanation. And right now, that feels like progress. You glance around at the others. Some nod slowly. Others look uneasy. A few seem almost relieved to have a word to attach to what they are seeing. Because naming something makes it feel smaller, more manageable, even when it is not. A woman steps forward slightly, as if considering intervening. She hesitates, watches, then steps back again. Because again, what would you do? Grab her arms, restrain her, and if she resists, if she cannot stop? The thought lingers, unresolved. You realize something quietly unsettling. Everyone here is waiting for someone else to act, and no one is acting. Because this situation does not fit into any familiar pattern. There is no script, no clear next step, just a growing sense that this is not resolving itself the way it should. Time passes. More people arrive. Some leave, shaking their heads, unwilling to carry this confusion with them, but most stay. Because leaving feels like giving up on understanding, and humans are very bad at that. You catch yourself doing something strange. You are watching not just the dancer, but the crowd, their reactions, their stillness, their hesitation, because in a way they are part of this. This is no longer just one person dancing. This is a group of people collectively not knowing what to do, and that might be the most unsettling part of all. A few days pass, and what was once a single dancer becomes several, then dozens. You notice it slowly at first, like realizing more people in the room are humming the same tune. Another woman joins, then a man, then a cluster of individuals all moving with that same frantic, unstoppable energy. You try to convince yourself it is coincidence. Maybe it is contagious enthusiasm, like when one person starts clapping and suddenly the whole room follows. Except here, the clapping never ends, and neither does the dancing. At first, it is subtle. You return to the street half expecting everything to have returned to normal. Perhaps the woman stopped. Perhaps this was a brief, strange episode that everyone will quietly agree not to discuss again. But she is still there, and now she is not alone. Another figure moves nearby, less confident, more hesitant, but unmistakably dancing. You blink, as if your eyes might be misinterpreting what they see. But no, and there are two. You feel a small, uncomfortable shift in your chest, because one is strange, two is something else. You watch as the second dancer's movements begin to mirror the first, not perfectly, not intentionally, but in that same uncontrolled, relentless rhythm. And then, a third. You do not see when it begins, only that suddenly there is another body in motion, then another. It spreads quietly without announcement, like a thought you cannot trace back to its origin. You hear murmurs in the crowd. It's spreading. Is it catching? No one says the word contagious out loud, but everyone is thinking it. You try to apply logic. Perhaps they are copying her. Perhaps this is a form of imitation. Humans imitate things. It is what we do. We yawn when others yawn. We laugh when others laugh. But this is not yawning. This is not laughter. This is something far more demanding and far more dangerous. You watch one of the new dancers closely. Their expression is not joyful, not even neutral. It is strained, confused, like someone who is aware of what is happening, but cannot influence it. That detail stays with you. Because imitation is a choice. This does not look like a choice. The number grows, slowly, then all at once. A handful becomes a group becomes a cluster, and suddenly the street feels different, more crowded, more chaotic, more alive in a way that is deeply unsettling. You step back slightly, giving yourself space, because the energy has changed. This is no longer an isolated event, this is a pattern, and patterns spread. You feel a quiet realization settle in your mind. If this can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, including you. You stand there, watching this growing spectacle, and suddenly become very aware of your own body. Your legs feel strange, not dancing, not yet, but aware, as if they are considering it. You shift uncomfortably, testing your control. You tell yourself you're fine, completely fine. You're not about to start spinning in the street like a medieval wind-up toy. And yet, the thought lingers, because everyone who is dancing now once stood exactly where you are standing. It starts as a thought, a small one, barely noticeable. What if your foot moved? You immediately dismiss it. Of course it will not. You're in control of your body. That is a fundamental assumption, one you have never had to question before, and yet you shift your weight just slightly, just to prove that you can. Your foot lifts, lands, controlled, intentional. Good, everything is normal. You exhale quietly, as if you've been holding your breath without realizing it. But now you are aware of your feet, of your legs, of the simple act of standing still, which strangely now feels like something you are actively maintaining. You glance back at the dancers. They are still moving, relentless, unstoppable. You notice how their feet strike the ground, over and over, no pause, no hesitation, just continuous motion, as if stopping is no longer part of the system. You swallow, because your brain very unhelpfully decides to imagine what that would feel like, to not be able to stop, to keep moving long after you wanted to rest, to feel your muscles burn, and continue anyway. You shift again, a little faster this time, just to reassure yourself. You are fine, completely fine. And yet, the thought lingers, because every single person dancing was once not dancing, just like you, standing, watching, thinking they were separate from this. You glance down at your feet again. They are still, obedient, predictable, for now. You tell yourself a quiet, firm sentence. You are not going to dance, and for a moment, that feels like a promise, but also like a question. Eventually the city officials step in, and by step in I mean they make a decision so baffling it feels almost impressive. They conclude that the problem is not too much dancing, but not enough proper dancing. Clearly these people need space, and perhaps music. Yes, music will help. You watch as they arrange for musicians to play, as if this is a festival that simply needs better organisation. It is the equivalent of seeing a fire and deciding what it really needs is more wood. You stand there as the decision unfolds, trying to follow the logic like a polite guest nodding through a conversation you do not understand. The officials speak with confidence, which is always reassuring, especially when they are completely wrong. They discuss the condition as if it were a kind of overheated blood, a physical imbalance that can only be resolved by continuing to dance it out. You blink slowly, processing this, because it sounds suspiciously like being told that the solution to exhaustion is more exhaustion. It is the medieval equivalent of being advised to fix insomnia by running a marathon at midnight. Soon workers are sent out to clear space in the streets. Platforms are constructed, not small ones either. Proper wooden stages, so sturdy enough to hold multiple dancers at once, as if the town is preparing for a performance that no one bought tickets for. You watch as carpenters hammer away, their movements calm and practical, completely disconnected from the chaos unfolding nearby. There is something deeply surreal about seeing normal work continue in the presence of something so abnormal. It is like organising furniture while the house is slowly floating away. Then come the musicians, fiddlers, drummers, people who likely woke up expecting a normal day and instead find themselves hired to accompany what appears to be a public medical emergency. They tune their instruments, glance nervously at the dancers, and begin to play. The sound rises into the air, lively and structured, the kind of music that would normally encourage celebration. But here, it lands differently. It does not guide the dancing. It follows it, like a soundtrack trying to keep up with something it does not understand. You watch the dancers respond. Their movements do not become calmer. They do not resolve into something orderly. If anything, they intensify. The rhythm gives them something to latch onto, something to amplify the motion that is already consuming them. It is as if the music has not cured the condition, but fed it. You feel a strange tightening in your chest as you realise what's happening. This is not treatment. This is acceleration. Around you the crowd reacts in mixed ways. Some seem reassured. There is comfort in seeing authority take action, even if the action makes very little sense. Others look more uneasy, their expressions shifting from confusion to quiet concern. You hear murmurs ripple through the group. This will help, someone insists, though their voice lacks conviction. Another person simply watches, arms crossed, as if waiting for the inevitable moment when everyone admits this was a terrible idea. The heat does not help. The summer air hangs thick and heavy, pressing down on the dancers as they move. You can see the strain in their bodies more clearly now, the way their steps falter before continuing, the way their arms twitch instead of flow. The music plays on, cheerful and persistent, completely at odds with the exhaustion written across their faces. It creates a strange contrast, like laughter echoing through a room where no one is smiling. You shift your stance, feeling the ground beneath your feet, grounding yourself in something stable. Because the situation feels increasingly unstable, the more organised it becomes, the less it makes sense. You glance at the officials again, standing at the edges, observing their solution in action. They look satisfied, or at least committed, and that might be the most concerning part. because once a decision is made with confidence, it becomes very difficult to undo, even when it is clearly not working. Time passes, the music continues, the dances continue, and you begin to understand something quietly unsettling. This is no longer just a strange event. It is now an officially endorsed strange event. The city has not only accepted it, but structured it, given it space, given it sound, given it permission to continue, and you stand there watching it unfold, realizing that sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the problem itself, but the way people choose to respond to it. Soon, the sound of drums and fiddles fills the air. It is lively, almost cheerful, which makes everything worse, because now the dancing has a soundtrack. You stand there, caught between disbelief and a strange, creeping urge to tap your foot. The dancers respond instantly, their movements becoming more intense, more synchronized. It is no longer just chaos, it is structured chaos, which is arguably more concerning. The music settles into a rhythm that feels familiar, almost comforting at first. It is the kind of sound that would normally drift through a market square during a celebration, something that invites people to gather, to smile, to forget their worries for a while. But here it lands differently. It feels misplaced, like hearing cheerful laughter in the middle of a thunderstorm. Your brain tries to match the sound to the scene and fails. The drums beat steadily, a pulse that seems to echo in your chest. The fiddles weave through the air, bright and insistent, as if trying to convince everyone that this is normal, that this is fine, that this is simply how things are now. You catch yourself noticing the rhythm, your mind beginning to follow it automatically, the way it always does. Humans are very good at syncing to patterns. It is one of those quiet instincts that usually serves you well. Except now, it feels like a liability. You glance down at your foot. It is still. Good. Very good. Let us keep it that way. Around you, the dancers move with renewed intensity. The presence of music does not calm them. It sharpens their motion, gives it edges, direction, something to push against. Their steps fall more clearly into patterns, but not in a way that suggests control. It is more like their bodies have found a current and are now being carried faster by it. You notice the way their arms rise and fall, the way their feet strike the ground in time with the drums, and it creates a strange illusion. For a brief moment it almost looks intentional, but then you see their faces, and the illusion collapses. There is no joy there, no sense of participation, just effort, strain. Quiet desperation of bodies being pushed beyond their limits. The music does not belong to them. It is something layered on top, like paint on a cracked wall. You feel a subtle shift in the crowd as well. The presence of music changes the atmosphere. It draws more people in. It holds them there longer. There is something hypnotic about rhythm, and something that keeps your attention even when you know you should probably leave. You notice more faces now, more bodies pressing closer, more eyes fixed on the dancers. The scene feels fuller, louder, more intense. You try to focus on something else. The buildings, the sky, the way the light falls across the street. But the sound keeps pulling you back. It threads through your thoughts, looping, repeating, refusing to fade into the background. You realize that the music has become part of the environment now, something you cannot easily ignore. And then there is the unsettling thought. If the music can influence the dancers, what is it doing to you? You shift again, more deliberately this time, testing your stillness. Your legs respond as expected, steady, controlled. But the awareness remains. The rhythm is there, just beneath the surface, waiting. You imagine what it would be like to give into it just for a moment, just to see. A single step, a small movement, nothing dramatic. You stop that thought immediately, because you are beginning to understand something important. The music is not just sound, it is structure. It gives shape to the chaos, makes it easier to follow, easier to continue, and once something has structure, it becomes harder to resist. You look back at the dancers, their movements now woven tightly with the rhythm, and feel a quiet chill settle in your chest. This was supposed to help. Instead, it has made everything clearer, and worse. And as the drums continue to beat, steady and unrelenting, you realise that the most dangerous part of all is not that the dancing continues, it is that it now has a rhythm. And rhythms are very hard to escape. The summer heat presses down like a heavy blanket, thick and relentless. You can feel it on your skin, in your lungs. Now imagine dancing in it, for hours, for days. The dancers are drenched, their faces flushed, their bodies pushed far beyond what any reasonable person would consider sustainable. You wipe your own forehead just watching them. Your heart races in sympathy. And still they do not stop. It is the kind of heat that does not simply exist around you, but settles into you. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your thoughts. The air feels heavier with every passing hour, as if breathing itself has become slightly more difficult, slightly more intentional. You notice how still everything else is. The buildings do not move. The sky does not change. Even the crowd, for all its shifting and murmuring, seems anchored in place. And yet, in the middle of all this stillness, the dancers continue. You watch one of them closely. Their shirt is soaked through, clinging to their back, darkened with sweat. Their hair sticks to their face in damp strands. Each movement seems to take more effort than the last, yet somehow the movement continues. There is no pause, no moment of rest, just step after step after step, like a clock that has forgotten how to stop ticking. You feel the heat in your own body, the slow build-up of discomfort that comes from simply standing here. Your neck grows damp. Your hands feel slightly slick. You shift your weight again, trying to find a position that feels less oppressive, but there is no escaping it. The heat is everywhere. And that is when the realization settles in more fully. They are not just dancing. They are dancing in this. You imagine yourself taking just a few steps just to test it. How long before your breathing quickens? How long before your muscles begin to protest? Minutes, perhaps. Maybe less. You glance back at the dancers, at the hours etched into their movements, and feel a quiet disbelief settle in your chest. This should not be possible. And yet, it is happening. The ground beneath their feet is dry and dusty, kicked up with every step. You can see the faint clouds rising, catching the light, clinging to their legs. Their shoes, once sturdy enough for daily life, now look worn, strained, as if they too are reaching their limits. You hear the soft scrape of leather against dirt over and over, a repetitive sound that blends with the distant rhythm of the music. Someone near you fans themselves weakly with a scrap of cloth. Another wipes their brow with the back of their hand, leaving a streak of dust across their skin. The crowd feels the heat, but they can step back, find shade, take a break. The dancers cannot. You notice one of them falter briefly, their steps slowing for just a fraction of a second. Your body reacts instinctively, leaning forward, expecting them to stop. But they do not. The rhythm pulls them back in, their feet catching the beat again, continuing as if that moment of hesitation never happened. It is not just physical now. There is something else layered beneath it. Something that pushes them past the natural limits of the body, past the signals that should be telling them to rest. You feel a strange mix of awe and discomfort watching it, because part of you recognizes the strength it takes to keep moving. And another part recognizes that this is not strength at all. This is compulsion. The sun continues its slow journey across the sky, indifferent to what is happening below. Time moves forward, as it always does, but here it feels stretched, elongated, as if each moment lingers longer than it should. You find yourself losing track of how long you've been standing here, how long they've been dancing, and that, perhaps, is the most unsettling part. Because if time can blur like this for you, what must it feel like for them? There is a sound you begin to notice. Not the music, not the murmuring crowd, but the laboured breathing of the dancers, the gasps, the uneven rhythm of bodies pushed to their limit. It is the sound of exhaustion made audible. You find it oddly unsettling, like hearing someone run endlessly without ever reaching a destination. At first, it blends into everything else. The music fills the air, the crowd shifts and whispers. The general noise of the street creates a kind of background haze. But once you notice it, you cannot unhear it. It sits beneath everything, steady and persistent. Breath, too fast, too shallow, too strained. You focus on one dancer again, drawn to the way their chest rises and falls with increasing urgency. Their breathing is no longer controlled. It comes in uneven bursts, sharp inhales, followed by quick, almost desperate exhales. You find yourself matching it unconsciously, your own breath adjusting before you catch yourself and slow it down again. It is contagious in a way that has nothing to do with the dancing itself. The human body is wired to respond to other bodies, to mirror, to empathize, to connect. And right now, what you are hearing is not just effort, it is distress. You shift slightly, trying to create distance between yourself and the sound, but distance does not help. It carries through the air, weaving between the notes of the fiddles, slipping past the beat of the drums. It is quieter than the music, but more persistent, more real. You hear a sharp intake of breath from somewhere to your left. You turn your head and see another dancer, their movements slightly less coordinated now, their face pale beneath the flush of exertion. Their mouth opens as they try to pull in air, but it never seems to be enough. And still, their feet continue. It creates a strange contradiction. The body is clearly failing, and yet it continues. You notice the small sounds that accompany the breathing now, the faint groans, the involuntary noises that escape when effort becomes too much to contain. They are not loud, not dramatic, but they are there, subtle reminders that this is not sustainable. And yet, it is sustained. You glance around at the crowd again. Some people have noticed it too. You can see it in their expressions, the way their brows furrow, the way their eyes linger a little longer on the dancers. The mood has shifted again, moving from curiosity to something heavier, something closer to concern. No one speaks about it directly, but everyone hears it. You realize that the music, which once seemed so dominant, has become almost secondary. It is still there, still playing, still trying to impose structure on the chaos. But the breathing cuts through it, grounding the scene in something unmistakably human. This is not a performance. This is not a ritual. This is a body reaching its limit over and over again. You find yourself wondering how long this can continue. How long before the body simply refuses, before it shuts down, overrides whatever force is driving it, and collapses into stillness. But then you remember, you have already seen how long it can go. Longer than it should, longer than makes sense. You feel a quiet tension settle in your chest, a subtle tightening that you cannot quite explain. It is not fear, exactly. Not yet. But it is something close to it. Because the sound of exhaustion is supposed to mean something. It is supposed to signal an end, a limit, a stopping point. But here, it means nothing, and that might be the most unsettling sound of all. It happens suddenly. One dancer stumbles, then falls. The crowd gasps, but there is no dramatic pause, no collective realization. The others keep moving. You stare at the fallen body, your mind struggling to process the scene. Because this is the moment when it becomes undeniable. This is not harmless. This is not entertainment. This is something else entirely. You do not see the exact moment it begins. 1 second they are moving like all the others, caught in that same relentless rhythm, and the next, something changes. Their step falters, not dramatically, just enough to notice. A slight misstep, a delay. The kind of small failure your body makes all the time and corrects without thinking. But this time it is not corrected. Their foot lands wrong. Their balance shifts. Their body tilts forward in a way that feels slow, almost gentle, as if the world itself has softened for a moment. Then they fall. It is not graceful. It is not controlled. It is the full weight of a human body hitting the ground without preparation. The sound is dull, heavy, final in a way that makes your stomach tighten. For a moment, everything seems to hold its breath. The crowd gasps, a collective intake of air that ripples outward, sharp and immediate. You feel it too, your own breath catching before you even realize it has happened. This is the moment. This is where it stops. It has to stop, but it does not. You look up, instinctively, expecting the other dancers to pause, to react, to break free from whatever is holding them. But they do not. Sober, their feet continue to strike the ground in that same relentless rhythm. Their arms move, their bodies turn. It is as if nothing has changed, except everything has. You look back down at the fallen figure. They are still, or at least stiller than they were. Their chest rises and falls rapidly, uneven, desperate. You can see the strain in their face, the exhaustion that has finally caught up with them. But there is something else too. A twitch, a small movement in the leg, as if the dancing has not entirely stopped, just paused. You feel a chill move through you despite the heat, because even in collapse, it lingers. Someone steps forward from the crowd, hesitant at first, then more certain. They kneel beside the fallen dancer, reaching out carefully as if unsure what they will find. Others follow, drawn by the shift in the scene, by the sudden, undeniable reality of what has happened. You hear voices now, not whispers, but actual words. They need water, move back, give them space. It feels almost like normality returning, like the situation has finally crossed into something recognizable. This is what people do when someone falls. This is familiar. This makes sense. And yet, just a few steps away, the dancing continues. The contrast is jarring. On one side, urgency, concern, human response. On the other, relentless motion. You find yourself caught between the two, your attention pulled in both directions at once. You want to focus on the person on the ground, to understand what is happening there, to anchor yourself in something that feels real and manageable. But your eyes keep drifting back to the dancers, because they are still moving, and that movement now feels different, heavier, more dangerous. You realize something quietly, something that settles deep in your chest. This was inevitable. It had to happen eventually. The body has limits. It always has. Muscles fail. Energy runs out. Systems shut down. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. Except here, the limit does not stop the process. It only interrupts it. You watch as the fallen dancer is lifted slightly, supported by those around them. Their limbs hang loosely, unresponsive for the moment, and yet there is still that faint tension, that subtle suggestion that if they were set back on their feet, they might continue. The thought lingers longer than it should. You step back slightly, creating distance between yourself and the scene, not out of fear exactly, but out of instinct. the same instinct that tells you to step away from something you cannot control. The crowd shifts, adjusting around the new reality. Some people move closer, drawn by concern. Others step back, creating space, their faces pale, their expressions uncertain. No one is laughing now. No one is making jokes. The mood has changed completely. Because this is no longer strange. It is dangerous. You glance around, noticing how people avoid looking directly at each other. There is a shared understanding now, something unspoken but deeply felt. Everyone has seen what happens when this continues too long, and yet it continues. You look back at the dancers one more time, their movements unchanged, their rhythm unbroken, and feel a quiet, unsettling realization settle into place. This is not a performance that will end when the audience leaves. This is not a moment that will pass with time. This is something that runs until the body gives out, and even then, it might not truly stop. You exhale slowly, the weight of it settling into you, because now you understand. The dancing does not end. People do. Eventually, the local physicians are called in. You imagine a calm, rational explanation will follow, something reassuring, something that makes sense. Instead, you get theories, humours, imbalances, heated blood, none of which feel particularly helpful when people are literally dancing themselves into collapse. You listen politely, nodding, while internally realising that no one has any idea what is happening. They arrive with confidence, which is always a promising start, especially in situations where confidence is doing most of the work. Long robes, serious expressions, the kind of posture that suggests they have spent years thinking about the human body, even if the human body has not always cooperated with their conclusions. You step slightly closer, not because you expect answers, but because you want to hear what answers sound like in a moment like this. They observe the dancers carefully, hands clasped behind their backs, heads tilted slightly, as if the correct angle of observation might reveal something hidden. One of them nods slowly, as though confirming a theory that exists only in his own mind. Another murmurs something about the balance of humours, the invisible fluids believed to govern everything from mood to movement. You recognise the tone. It is the tone of explanation without certainty, of language filling the space where understanding should be. You hear words like overheating, excess blood, internal agitation, phrases that sound impressive, structured, almost comforting in their familiarity, because they suggest a system, a logic, a reason behind what you're witnessing. But as you look back at the dancers, at their exhausted faces and relentless motion, those words begin to feel thin. One physician suggests that the dancers must continue, that stopping abruptly could be dangerous, that the body must be allowed to release whatever imbalance has taken hold. You blink slowly, processing this, because it sounds remarkably similar to the official's earlier decision, just with more medical vocabulary attached to it. It is the same idea, dressed in different language. Around you the crowd listens, some nod, relieved to hear something that resembles an explanation. Others remain quiet, their expressions unchanged, as if they are waiting for something more concrete, something that actually alters what is happening in front of them. You watch as one of the physicians approaches a dancer, observing them more closely. He reaches out, not to stop them, but to feel their pulse, his fingers pressing lightly against the wrist of a body that refuses to be still. It is an awkward interaction, almost absurd. The act of diagnosis requires stillness. The condition refuses to allow it. He withdraws his hand after a moment, offering a small, thoughtful nod, as if this has confirmed something important. But whatever that confirmation is, it does not translate into action. The dancer continues. You feel a quiet realization settle in. They are not here to solve this. They are here to explain it. And those not the same thing. You notice how quickly explanations can become a kind of comfort. Even when they do not change the situation, they create the illusion of control. If you can name something, categorize it, place it within a system, it feels less threatening, more manageable, even if it is not. But here, the illusion is beginning to crack, because the system does not account for this. The body is supposed to have limits. It is supposed to stop when it is tired, to rest when it is strained. Pain is supposed to mean something. Exhaustion is supposed to end something. And yet none of those rules seem to apply. You glance at the physicians again. They continue to observe, to discuss quietly among themselves, their voices low, measured, professional. They are doing what they know how to do, applying knowledge to a situation that does not quite fit it. There is something almost human about that, and something deeply unsettling. Because if the people who are supposed to understand the body cannot explain what is happening to it, then what chance do you have? You shift your weight again, grounding yourself in your own stillness, your own control. Your legs respond as expected. Your breathing remains steady. For now, everything is normal. But the certainty you once felt is gone, replaced by a quieter, more uncertain thought. If knowledge cannot explain this, then what is left? When medicine fails, naturally you turn to religion. The church steps in, offering prayers, rituals, and the comforting suggestion that perhaps this is divine punishment or spiritual affliction. You stand among the gathered crowd, listening to solemn words echo through the air and wonder if anyone is going to suggest. Not dancing. The shift happens gradually, almost respectfully. Where the physicians brought observation and theory, the church brings certainty. Not the kind rooted in physical explanation, but the kind that does not require proof. It arrives with quiet authority, carried in the measured voices of priests and the familiar cadence of prayer. You notice how the crowd responds differently this time. There is less questioning, less hesitation. Faith has a way of settling into people, offering something solid when everything else feels uncertain. You feel it too, not necessarily belief, but the weight of the moment, the sense that something larger is being invoked. The priests move through the space with deliberate calm, their presence creating a subtle shift in the atmosphere. They speak of trials, of suffering, of forces beyond human understanding, words that do not explain what is happening, but frame it in a way that feels purposeful. And purpose, even a frightening one, can be strangely comforting. You listen as they suggest that this may be a test, or a punishment, or a manifestation of spiritual unrest. The exact explanation varies, but the underlying message remains the same. This is not random. This is not meaningless. You glance at the dancers again. They are still moving, unchanged by the words spoken around them. The prayers begin softly, a low murmur that spreads through the crowd. Some people bow their heads, others close their eyes. A few join in, their voices blending into the collective rhythm of belief. It creates a strange layering of sound, the steady beat of the music, the laboured breathing of the dancers, and now, the quiet, persistent thread of prayer. You find yourself standing still, caught between them all. There is something almost surreal about it. The idea that divine intervention might be unfolding in the same space as physical exhaustion, that spiritual explanations are being offered alongside bodies that are visibly failing. You wonder, briefly, if this helps. Not the dancers, but the people watching. Because belief can be a form of control, a way to hold on to something when everything else feels unstable. If this is punishment, then there is a reason. If it is a test, then there is an outcome. If it is divine, then it is, in some way, intentional. and intentional things feel less frightening than random ones. But as you watch the dancers, their movements unchanged, their exhaustion deepening, you begin to question that comfort. Because if this is intentional, then what does that say? You notice a priest approaching one of the dancers, raising a hand as if to bless them. The gesture is careful, measured, filled with meaning. But the dancer does not respond. Their body continues its relentless motion, unaffected by the presence beside them. The blessing hangs in the air for a moment, then fades. The priest steps back. You feel a quiet tension in that moment, a subtle acknowledgement that something is not aligning. The rituals are being performed, the words are being spoken, and yet the outcome remains unchanged. You look around at the crowd again. Some people seem reassured, their expressions softened by the presence of faith. Others look more uncertain now, as if the lack of visible effect has created new questions rather than answers. You remain still, listening, observing, feeling the layers of explanation build around something that refuses to be explained. And in that stillness, a thought begins to form. If neither medicine nor faith can stop this, then what exactly are you witnessing? You glance down at your feet again, just briefly, still, quiet, obedient, for now. And that last part lingers longer than it should. Soon, whispers spread about St. Vitus, a figure associated with dancing mania and nervous disorders. The idea takes hold that this is a curse, a punishment, or perhaps a strange form of divine influence. You find yourself nodding along, not because it makes perfect sense, but because it makes more sense than everything else so far. The name passes through the crowd like a quiet ripple. St. Vitus. It has a weight to it, a familiarity that feels almost reassuring. You've heard it before in stories, in warnings, in those half-remembered conversations that surface when something strange needs explaining. It gives the chaos a shape, a label, something you can hold on to. You notice how quickly people adopt it. The moment a name is attached, the uncertainty begins to settle. Conversations shift. The tone changes. It is no longer just something happening. It is something caused. Something with a source. A curse, someone says beside you. A punishment, another adds. You nod slightly, not because you are convinced, but because the alternative is admitting that there is no explanation at all. And that feels far more unsettling. Humans prefer a frightening answer to no answer. At least a curse can be understood. It can be appeased, avoided, appealed to. Randomness offers none of that. You watch as people begin to reinterpret what they are seeing. The dancers are no longer just exhausted bodies moving beyond reason. They are victims of something unseen, something intentional, something watching, perhaps. It changes the way you look at them. There is a subtle shift in your perception, a quiet reframing. The movements that once seemed chaotic now carry a different weight. Each step feels less like a physical act and more like a symptom of something deeper, something hidden just beneath the surface of what you can see. You glance at one of the dancers again, their face drawn, their breathing uneven, their body still caught in that relentless rhythm. And for a moment, you imagine something else there. Not just muscle and bone, but influence, pressure, a force that does not belong to them. It's not a comfortable thought. But it is a compelling one, because it answers a question that has been lingering since the beginning. Why does this continue? If it is a curse, then the answer is simple, because it is meant to. You hear more details now, stories of St. Vitus, of afflictions that cause uncontrollable movement, of people who danced until they collapsed. The stories are not precise, not consistent, but they do not need to be. They only need to be close enough to what you are seeing to feel believable. And they are. You feel the idea settling into the crowd, spreading quietly, just like the dancing itself. It moves from person to person, reshaping understanding, and offering a framework where none existed before. You notice how it affects behaviour as well. Some people step back slightly, creating more distance between themselves and the dancers, as if proximity might matter. Others begin to whisper prayers more urgently, their words faster now, more focused. A few even look afraid, not of the dancers, but of whatever might be causing them. You shift your stance again, feeling the ground beneath your feet, reminding yourself of something simple and solid. Because the idea of a curse changes things. It introduces a new kind of uncertainty, one that is harder to measure, harder to predict. You glance down at your legs again, just briefly. Still, steady, unaffected. And yet, the thought lingers. If this is something external, something that can reach people, then what determines who it reaches? You look back at the dancers, their movements unchanged, their exhaustion deepening, and feel a quiet unease settle in your chest. Because explanations, even frightening ones, have consequences. And this one suggests something you're not entirely ready to accept, that this is not just happening, it is happening to people, and that means it could happen to you. You begin to notice the practical details, shoes splitting, soles worn thin, feet wrapped in whatever scraps of cloth can be found. It is the kind of detail that makes everything feel more real, more physical, more painful. Because this is not just movement. This is wear and tear on the human body at a level it was never designed to handle. At first, it is easy to focus on the larger picture, the movement, the crowd, the sound, the overwhelming strangeness of it all. But as time passes, your attention begins to shift toward the smaller things, the details that are harder to ignore once you see them. You look down at their feet, because that is where everything begins. You notice the condition of their shoes first. Leather, once sturdy and practical, now stretched and strained beyond its limits. The soles are thinning, worn down by constant friction against the ground. Some have begun to split, small cracks that widen with every step. You watch as one dancer's shoe bends in a way it should not, the material giving under pressure, unable to keep up with the relentless motion. It is a quiet failure, but an important one, because shoes are meant to protect the foot, to absorb impact, to reduce strain, and here they are failing. You imagine the sensation, the repeated impact of each step, the gradual loss of cushioning, the increasing contact with the hard ground beneath. It is not immediate pain. It builds slowly, layer by layer, until it becomes something constant, something unavoidable. You see someone attempt to help. They bring cloth, wrapping it around a dancer's foot, securing it as best they can without stopping the movement entirely. It is an awkward process, improvised, imperfect. The cloth shifts as the dancer continues, loosening with each step, offering only temporary relief. It is not enough. But it is something, and sometimes something is all you have. You notice bare skin now, glimpses of it where shoes have failed completely, reddened, raw, pressed repeatedly against the ground with no protection left. You feel a subtle tension in your own feet, a phantom echo of what you're seeing, on your body reacting instinctively to the idea of that kind of strain. You shift again, lifting one foot slightly, then the other, just to remind yourself of the difference, of the comfort of stillness, of control. The contrast is stark. You can stop. They cannot. You realize that this is where the situation becomes undeniable in a different way, not through collapse, not through theory or explanation, but through the simple, visible breakdown of something physical. Shoes are not meant to wear out in hours. Feet are not meant to endure this. And yet, here they are, enduring, or trying to. You watch another dancer stumble slightly, their step uneven, their balance compromised by the condition of their feet. But they do not stop. They adjust, compensate, continue. The body finds ways to adapt, even when it should not have to. That adaptability, normally a strength, now feels like a liability, because it allows the process to continue longer than it should. You glance around the crowd again. Others have noticed too. You can see it in the way their eyes drop, the way their expressions tighten, the way they shift uncomfortably as they watch. It is one thing to see movement. It is another to see damage. Real, physical, undeniable damage. You feel a quiet heaviness settle in your chest. Because this is no longer abstract. This is not about theories or curses or explanations. This is about the body breaking down, step by step, and still continuing. You look down at your own shoes one more time, intact, stable, reliable, and for the first time you feel a strange sense of gratitude for something so simple. Because in a world where even your own feet might betray you, a solid pair of shoes suddenly feels like a luxury beyond measure. People try to help. They bring water. They offer food. But the dancers often cannot or will not stop long enough to properly recover. You watch someone attempt to eat while still moving. The act awkward and desperate. It is like watching someone try to rest without ever lying down. At first, the effort seems practical, sensible even. If the body's being pushed this far, then it must need fuel, water, bread, anything to keep it going. You see people weaving through the edges of the dancers, holding out cups, small loaves, whatever they can gather. There is a quiet urgency to it now, a shift from curiosity to care. You watch as one dancer is offered water. The cup is held close, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. For a moment it looks like they might stop. Their movement slows slightly, just enough to allow the water to reach their lips, but they do not stop. They drink while moving. It is an awkward, almost unnatural motion, their body continuing its rhythm while their hands fumble with the cup. Water spills down their chin, soaking into their already damp clothes. They swallow quickly, unevenly, as if their body cannot decide whether it is dancing or drinking. You feel a strange discomfort watching it, because these are two actions that should not happen at the same time. Movement and rest, effort and recovery. They are supposed to alternate, to balance each other out. But here they overlap, and the result is ineffective. The water helps perhaps, but not enough. Not in the way it should. Not in the way that would allow the body to truly recover. It is like trying to refill a cup that is constantly being emptied. You see another person attempt to feed a dancer, a piece of bread held out carefully, offered again and again until the dancer finally takes a bite. The motion is clumsy, rushed, driven more by necessity than hunger. They chew quickly, their jaw working as their feet continue to move beneath them. You imagine the effort it takes to coordinate eating and dancing at the same time, to process food while the body is already overwhelmed. It feels inefficient, unsustainable, and yet it continues. You notice how little time they actually spend consuming anything. A sip here, a bite there, never enough to truly replenish what they are losing. Sweat continues to pour from their bodies, carrying away water faster than it can be replaced. Energy drains steadily, regardless of what is offered. The imbalance is obvious and growing. You feel it in your own body now, just watching. A subtle tightening in your stomach, a faint dryness in your throat, as if your body is reacting to the idea of such prolonged exertion without proper rest. You swallow, reminding yourself that you are not the one dancing. You can step away. You can drink when you want. You can sit. That last thought lingers, because they cannot. You see someone try to intervene more directly, placing a hand on a dancer's arm, gently urging them to stop, to sit, to rest. The gesture is careful, well-intentioned. It does not work. The dancer pulls away, not aggressively but automatically, as if the motion itself is guiding them, redirecting them back into the rhythm. There is no anger, no resistance in the usual sense, just continuation. It is as if stopping is not an option their body recognizes. You step back slightly, the realization settling deeper now. This is not just about movement. It is about the absence of pause, the absence of that quiet moment between actions where the body resets, recovers, prepares. Without that pause, everything begins to blur. Eating becomes inefficient. Drinking becomes insufficient. Rest becomes impossible. You glance at the dancers again, their movements steady, their bodies visibly strained, and feel a quiet, uneasy thought take shape. They are not forgetting to stop. They cannot remember how. And in a situation like this, that difference matters more than anything, because forgetting can be corrected, but losing the ability entirely, that is something else, something far more difficult to undo. Around you, families gather, their faces filled with worry and helplessness. You see loved ones calling out, reaching, trying to intervene. But how do you stop someone who cannot stop themselves? You feel the weight of their fear, heavy and quiet. At first they stay at the edges, close enough to see, not close enough to interfere. You notice them gradually, not as a group but as individuals. A woman clutching her hands tightly together, her knuckles pale from the pressure. A man standing rigid, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on a single figure in the crowd. A child holding onto a sleeve, looking up, confused, trying to understand why something so strange is happening to someone they know. It changes the scene in a way that is difficult to ignore. Because this is no longer just a public event, it is personal. You watch as one woman steps forward, her movements hesitant but determined. She calls out a name, her voice cutting through the noise with a clarity that draws attention. The dancer she's calling to does not respond. Not because they do not hear, but because whatever is driving them seems louder. She tries again, closer this time, reaching out. Her hand brushes against the dancer's arm, and for a moment there is a connection, physical, real, something that should matter, but it does not stop the movement. The dancer continues, their body shifting slightly around the contact, adjusting without breaking rhythm. It is not rejection. It is not even awareness in the usual sense. It is continuation. The woman withdraws her hand slowly, as if unsure what just happened. Her face changes, the initial determination giving way to something softer, something heavier, helplessness. You feel it too, because this is the part that is hardest to watch. Not the dancing, not the exhaustion, but the inability to help. You see others trying in small ways, offering support, walking alongside the dancers, staying close as if proximity might make a difference. Some speak softly, words meant to comfort, to reassure, even if they are not fully understood. It creates a strange contrast. On one side, relentless motion. On the other, stillness filled with concern. You notice how the families adapt in their own quiet ways. They stop trying to stop the dancers and begin trying to protect them instead, clearing space, guiding them away from obstacles, staying close enough to catch them if they fall. It is not a solution. But it is something, and sometimes something is all that is left. You feel the emotional weight of it settling into the air, heavier than the heat, heavier than the sound. It is not loud. It does not demand attention in the same way the dancing does, but it is there, constant, persistent. You glance at the faces around you, noticing the shared understanding that has begun to form. This is not a spectacle anymore. It is a situation, one that affects people directly, intimately. You catch yourself imagining what it would feel like to recognize someone among the dancers, to see a familiar face moving in that same uncontrolled rhythm, to call out to them and receive no response. The thought lingers longer than you would like, because it makes everything closer, more immediate. You shift your stance again, grounding yourself, reminding yourself that you're still separate from this, still observing, still in control. But the distance feels smaller now, thinner, because the presence of families changes the nature of what you're witnessing. It is no longer just about what is happening. It is about who it is happening to. And that makes it harder to dismiss, harder to ignore, harder to distance yourself from. You look back at the dancers, then at the people standing beside them, and feel a quiet realization settle in. Sometimes the hardest part is not enduring something yourself. It is watching someone else endure it, and knowing you cannot make it stop. As days turn into weeks, something unexpected happens. The chaos becomes routine. You find yourself adjusting to it, walking around dancers, timing your errands to avoid the busiest streets. It becomes part of life in the same way one eventually adapts to construction noise or a neighbour who refuses to stop practicing the same song. At first, this thought feels almost offensive. How could something like this ever become normal? How could a street filled with exhausted, endlessly moving bodies become something you simply work around? And yet, slowly, quietly, it does. You wake up one morning and realize you're not surprised anymore. The sound of movement outside does not pull you to the window with urgency. It registers, yes, but it no longer feels new, it feels expected. You already know what you will see before you even look. Dancers, still dancing. You step outside, and instead of stopping, you walk around them. Not dramatically, not with hesitation. Just a slight shift in your path. A quiet adjustment. The same way you might step around a puddle or a cart left in the street. Your body adapts before your mind fully processes it. You notice others doing the same. People carry baskets, deliver goods, speak in low voices. Life continues, not because the situation has improved, but because it has persisted long enough to become part of the environment. The extraordinary has settled into the background. It is not acceptance. Not really. It is adaptation. You begin to learn the rhythms of it. Not the music, not the dancers themselves, but the patterns around them. Which streets are busiest? Which times of day are more crowded? Where it is easier to pass without getting too close. You find yourself making small decisions. I will take this route instead. I will go earlier. I will avoid that square. These are not dramatic changes. They are subtle, practical, the kind of adjustments people make all the time without thinking too much about them, and that is what unsettles you. Because this should not be something you adjust to. This should be something that ends. You pause briefly at the edge of a street, watching as a group of dancers moves through the space you would normally cross. You wait, patient, almost calm, until there is a gap. Then you step through, continuing on your way. It feels efficient, and that realization sits strangely with you. You hear someone nearby discussing prices, their tone casual, almost bored. Another person complains about the heat. A third talks about something entirely unrelated, their voice steady, grounded in normal concerns. The conversations continue, the world continues, and in the middle of it, the dancing continues. You begin to understand something about the human mind. It has a remarkable ability to normalize almost anything given enough time. to take what is strange and unfamiliar and slowly reshape it into something manageable, not by solving it, but by living around it. You feel this happening within yourself. The initial shock has faded. The constant tension has softened into something quieter, something more sustainable. You're still aware, still concerned, but no longer overwhelmed. And that shift feels dangerous, because it suggests that the situation has not improved. You have simply grown used to it. You glance at the dancers again, their movements as relentless as ever, their bodies still pushed beyond their limits, and feel a subtle resistance rise in you. A quiet refusal to fully accept what you are seeing. Because adaptation is helpful, but it can also be blinding. It can make something ongoing feel permanent, something temporary feel inevitable. You take a slow breath, reminding yourself that this is not normal, that just because you have learned to move around it does not mean it belongs here. And yet, as you continue walking, adjusting your path once more, you cannot ignore the quiet truth settling beneath that thought. If something lasts long enough, it does not need to make sense anymore. It just needs to continue. And right now, that is exactly what it is doing. Stories begin to circulate, explanations multiply. Some say it is poisoned grain, others insist it is hysteria. You hear it all, absorbing each theory like pieces of a puzzle that never quite fit together. At first, the rumours arrive quietly, scarce carried in low voices and half-finished sentences. You catch fragments as you pass by groups of people, the way you might overhear the beginning of a conversation but never quite reach the end. They say it started with, someone whispers. I heard that it's because, another adds. No one sounds certain, but everyone sounds invested. It spreads the way all rumours do, not in a straight line, but in overlapping circles, each version slightly different from the last. One person claims it is the bread, contaminated grain, perhaps spoiled or cursed in some unseen way. You consider this for a moment. It feels practical, tangible, something you can avoid. Simply do not eat the wrong bread. Simple. But then someone else insists it is not the bread at all. It is the mind. A kind of shared madness, they say. A wave of hysteria moving through the city. You hear the word repeated, though no one explains exactly what it means. It has a certain authority to it, the kind of word that sounds like it belongs to people who understand things. You nod slightly, not because you agree, but because it feels like a possibility. And then another voice cuts through. It is punishment. You hear that one often. Punishment for sins, for pride, for something done, or perhaps not done, that has drawn attention from forces beyond your understanding. It is a familiar explanation, one that fits easily into the patterns people already believe. And because it is familiar, it is persuasive. You begin to notice how each rumour reflects the person telling it. The practical ones speak of food and illness. The devout speak of divine influence. The fearful speak of curses. Each explanation reveals something about the person as much as it does about the event, and none of them fully explain what you are seeing. You try to follow one theory through, just to see where it leads. If it is the grain, then why are some unaffected? If it is the mind, then why does it look so physical? If it is punishment, then why these people and not others? The questions multiply faster than the answers. You find yourself standing in the middle of it, listening, collecting these fragments, turning them over in your mind like objects that might reveal something if you look at them long enough. But they do not settle. They do not align. They remain separate, incomplete. You notice how quickly people cling to the version that feels right to them. Not the one that is most accurate, because accuracy is difficult to measure here, but the one that fits their understanding of the world, the one that feels less threatening, or at least more predictable. Because unpredictability is the real problem. If this can happen without reason, without pattern, without warning, then it can happen at any time to anyone. That thought lingers, so people build reasons, even if those reasons are fragile, even if they contradict each other. You overhear two people arguing quietly. One insists it is illness, the other shakes their head, firmly convinced it is something spiritual. Their voices rise slightly, not in anger but in urgency. Each one needs their explanation to hold, because without it, there is nothing to stand on. You step away, letting the conversation fade behind you, because you are beginning to understand something. The rumours are not really about solving the problem. They're about surviving it. They give shape to uncertainty. They create the illusion of control. If you believe it is the bread, you can avoid the bread. If you believe it is a curse, you can pray. If you believe it is madness, you can distance yourself from those affected. Each theory offers a small sense of safety, even if that safety is imagined. You glance back at the dancers still moving, still caught in that endless rhythm, and feel a quiet tension settle in your chest. Because none of the rumours change what is happening. They do not slow the dancing. They do not ease the exhaustion. They do not bring anyone back to stillness. They simply exist alongside it. You look down at your own hands, steady, controlled, and wonder how long that will remain true. Because if no one can agree on why this is happening, then there's no clear way to stop it, and in the absence of reason. Rumours will always move faster, faster than answers, faster than solutions, and sometimes faster than the truth. At some point, you test yourself again. You stand still, completely still, just to prove you can. You focus on your breathing, your balance, your control, because the idea that you might not have it is deeply unsettling. You do not make a scene about it. There is no dramatic declaration, no sudden decision announced to the crowd. It happens quietly, almost privately, in the space between one thought and the next. You simply decide to stop moving. Completely. You plant your feet. You straighten your posture. You focus. And for a moment, everything feels exactly as it should. Your body is yours. Your muscles respond the way they always have. Your balance holds. Your breathing remains steady, slow, controlled. You feel a small sense of relief settle in your chest. Subtle, but real. This is normal. This is how things are supposed to work. You remain still, just to be sure. The sounds continue around you. The music, the movement, the uneven rhythm of breath and footsteps. But you separate yourself from it, mentally stepping back, drawing a line between you and what is happening just a few feet away. You're not part of that. You are observing it. That distinction matters. You shift your attention inward, noticing the small sensations in your body, the pressure of your feet against the ground, the slight tension in your legs as they hold your weight, the rise and fall of your chest. Everything feels predictable, reassuring. You take a slow breath, in, out, stillness. You hold on to it, because stillness has become something valuable now, something you are aware of in a way you were not before. It is no longer the default. It is something you actively maintain. And that changes how it feels. You glance briefly at the dancers again, just for a moment. Their movements are as relentless as ever, their bodies caught in that same looping rhythm, unable to break free. You watch them, then look back down at your own feet, still, exactly where you left them. You feel a quiet sense of control return. But then, a thought, small, uninvited. What if you moved? You dismiss it immediately. Of course you could move. That is not the question. The question is whether you would stop. You shift your weight slightly, just enough to test the transition. One foot lifts, lands, controlled, intentional, exactly as expected. Good. Everything is fine. You take another breath. But the awareness lingers now. because you have introduced movement into the system again, and movement, once started, has a way of continuing. You stop again, firmly, deliberately, just to prove the point. Stillness returns, but it feels thinner now, less automatic. You notice how your attention has narrowed, focused entirely on something that used to require no attention at all. Standing, moving, stopping. These were things your body handled without your involvement. Now, they feel like decisions. You become aware of the rhythm around you again. The music, the footsteps, the steady, unrelenting beat that seems to pulse through the space, connecting everything, pulling at the edges of your awareness. You feel it in your chest, in your legs, not as movement, not yet, but as potential. And that is enough. You take a step back, not out of fear, but out of instinct, creating distance, giving yourself space, as if proximity might matter, even though you have no proof that it does. You remind yourself, quietly, firmly, you're in control. You can stop. You've already proven that. And yet, you test it again, just to be sure. A small movement, a shift, a step. Then, stillness. It works. Of course it works. And still you repeat it, because the need to confirm it has not gone away. It has grown. You realize something in that moment, something that settles into you with a quiet weight. Control is not something you notice when you have it. It is something you notice when you begin to question it. You glance one last time at the dancers, their movements unchanged, their bodies continuing long past the point where they should have stopped, and feel a subtle tension return to your chest, because they were once standing, just like you, still, certain, unaware, and now they are not. You take a slow breath, grounding yourself once more, holding on to the stillness you have, for now, because the edge between control and something else feels closer than it should, and you're no longer entirely sure where it begins. The dancing does not stop at night. The sounds continue, softer perhaps, but constant. You lie awake, listening, your mind unable to fully rest. It is like living next to a party that never ends. Except, no one is enjoying it. At first you expect darkness to bring relief. Night usually does that. It softens the edges of things, quiets the noise, gives the world permission to pause. Here you tell yourself that whatever is happening will slow when the sun goes down, that the dancers, exhausted beyond reason, will finally collapse into stillness, that the city will breathe again. But night comes, and nothing stops. The music fades slightly, less organized now, less deliberate. Some musicians have gone, some remain, but the rhythm continues in fragments, broken pieces of sound that drift through the dark. And beneath it, steady and unmistakable, the sound of movement. Feet, still moving. You lie in your bed staring into the dimness, listening. The sounds carry differently at night. There are fewer distractions, fewer voices, fewer interruptions. What remains becomes clearer, sharper. You can hear the individual steps now, the uneven rhythm, the occasional stumble that corrects itself before it becomes a fall. You shift under your blanket, trying to find comfort, trying to settle into rest, but your mind does not follow, because it is still out there. You close your eyes, and you can still hear it, a soft, persistent scraping, the faint echo of motion that refuses to end. It is not loud enough to demand attention, but not quiet enough to ignore. It sits just at the edge of your awareness, like a thought that will not fully form but will not disappear either. You turn onto your side, then onto your back, adjusting, repositioning, doing all the small things you normally do before sleep comes. But sleep feels distant, delayed, as if your mind is waiting for something to resolve before it allows you to rest. But nothing resolves. The dancing continues. You begin to notice how the sound changes over time. It becomes less structured, less tied to any rhythm you can recognize. The dancers are not following music anymore. They are following something else, something internal, something that does not require external cues. That realization sits heavily with you, because it means this is not sustained by the environment, it is sustained by them, or whatever is driving them. You hear a sudden shift in the sound, a stumble, a fall perhaps, a brief disturbance in the rhythm. You hold your breath, waiting for silence to follow, but it does not. The movement resumes, the pattern continues. You exhale slowly, a quiet tension releasing from your chest. Though you're not sure why you are holding it in the first place, you realize you have been waiting for an end, for a break, for something that signals closure. But there is no closure here, only continuation. And you open your eyes again, staring into the darkness of your room. It feels smaller now, more enclosed. The outside world, normally distant at night, feels closer, more present, as if the boundaries between inside and outside have thinned. You're aware of your own body again, your legs still, your breathing steady. You focus on it, grounding yourself in something predictable, something you can control, in, out, still. You hold on to that stillness, letting it anchor you, because outside there is no stillness. You imagine the dancers under the dim light of torches or moonlight, their movements slower now perhaps, but no less persistent. Shadows stretching and shifting around them, creating shapes that blur and reform with every step. It feels almost unreal, and yet it is happening right now. You turn your head slightly, as if that might change the sound, but it does not. It follows you, not physically, but mentally. Once you're aware of it, it is everywhere. You wonder how long this can continue, not just for them, but for the city, for the people trying to sleep, trying to think, trying to live alongside something that does not rest. Because sleep requires quiet, and quiet is no longer available. You feel your thoughts begin to slow, not because the world has calmed, but because your body insists on rest eventually. Fatigue settles in, heavy and unavoidable. Your eyes grow heavier, you're breathing deeper. But even as you drift closer to sleep, the sound remains, faint, persistent, unresolved. And just before you finally slip under, one last thought lingers, soft but clear. Morning will not change this. It will simply reveal it again, exactly as it is, while still moving, still ongoing, still refusing to stop. Eventually, officials decide to move the dancers to a shrine outside the city, a change of scenery, perhaps divine intervention. You watch as they are guided away, still moving, still unable to stop. It feels like relocating a storm. The decision arrives with the same quiet confidence as all the others, calm voices, firm nods, a sense that this, finally, might be the step that changes things. If the city streets have failed to contain whatever this is, then perhaps distance will. Perhaps the problem belongs somewhere else. You hear the reasoning as it spreads through the crowd. The dancers must be taken to a place of healing, a sacred location, somewhere outside the noise and distraction of daily life, somewhere closer to divine influence. It sounds thoughtful, measured, almost hopeful. And hope, at this point, is something people are willing to try. You watch as preparations begin, not rushed, not chaotic, but deliberate, the kind of careful organisation that suggests people still believe control is possible. Paths are cleared, space is made. The dancers, still caught in their relentless motion, are gently guided toward the edges of the city. It is not easy. You see how difficult it is to move someone who cannot stop moving. Hands reach out, not to restrain, but to steer, to redirect. A subtle pressure here, a guiding step there. The dancers shift direction, but not by choice. They're carried by their own motion, simply nudged along a different path. It feels like trying to guide water. You follow at a distance, along with many others. There is something about movement that draws people in. I either need to see what happens next, to witness the outcome, even if no one is quite sure what that outcome will be. The city slowly fades behind you. The familiar walls, the crowded streets, the constant noise of daily life. It is replaced by open space, quieter surroundings, a different kind of stillness. But the dancing comes with you. You notice how out of place it feels here. In the open air, without the tight confines of the city streets, the movement seems even more exposed. More visible. There is nothing to contain it, nothing to frame it, just bodies moving endlessly in a space that offers no resistance. The shrine comes into view gradually, a modest structure, worn but significant, standing as a place of belief, of ritual, of quiet hope. It feels appropriate in a way. If something cannot be solved by reason, perhaps it can be resolved by faith. That is the idea. You watch as the dancers are brought closer, their movements unchanged, their rhythm unbroken. The people guiding them look tired now, their efforts slow but steady. There is determination there, but also something else, uncertainty, because moving the dancers has not changed them. It has only changed where they are. You feel that realization settle quietly in your mind. Location does not alter the condition. It does not reduce the motion. It does not ease the strain. It simply shifts the setting. And yet, everyone continues. Because doing something feels better than doing nothing. You stand at the edge of the gathering, watching as the dancers circle, stumble, continue. The shrine looms nearby, silent, waiting. There's a sense of anticipation in the air, as if something is about to happen, as if this place might finally offer what the city could not. You want to believe it. It would be easier. You glance around at the others. Some look hopeful, their expressions softened by the possibility of resolution. Others remain cautious, their eyes fixed on the dancers, searching for any sign of change. But there is no change. Not yet. The movement continues, steady and relentless, as if unaware of the shift in surroundings, as if unaffected by the intentions behind it. You feel a quiet thought take shape. You can move the people, you can change the place, you can alter the setting, the context, the environment. But if the cause remains, then everything else remains too. You shift your stance slightly, feeling the ground beneath your feet, grounding yourself once again in something stable. Because here, in this new place, with all the effort that has gone into bringing everyone here, the truth feels clearer than ever. This is not something you can simply relocate. It does not stay behind. It follows. And as you watch the dancers continue, their bodies still caught in that endless loop, you realise something unsettling. You have not moved away from the madness. You have just taken a different path through it. At the shrine, rituals are performed, prayers offered, shoes blessed. There is a sense of desperation wrapped in ceremony. You stand quietly, hoping like everyone else that this might finally be the solution. The shrine itself feels different from the city. Quieter, heavier somehow. The kind of place where people come not for answers but for relief. You notice the worn stone beneath your feet. The marks left behind by years of visitors who arrived carrying burdens they could not solve on their own. It is a place built on belief, and right now, belief is in high demand. The dancers are guided closer, still moving, still trapped in that same relentless rhythm. Their presence feels almost disruptive here, like something out of place in a setting meant for stillness. And yet, they are here now, brought with intention, placed within reach of something that is supposed to help. You watch as the rituals begin. The priests move with careful precision, their actions measured, deliberate. There is no hesitation in their gestures, no uncertainty in their voices. They speak words that have been spoken many times before in situations where people needed something beyond themselves. The familiarity of it all creates a kind of structure, and something steady in the middle of everything unstable. Prayers rise into the air, low and rhythmic, carried by voices that seem to know exactly where they're going. You listen, not necessarily understanding every word, but feeling the weight of them, the intention behind them. Around you, others join in, their voices blending together, creating a shared moment of focus. You feel it too, that quiet pull toward hope. Because if this works, everything changes. If this works, there is a reason, a solution, a way forward. You watch as the dancers are brought forward, one by one, still moving, still unable to stop. The priests approach them, hands raised, offering blessings, tracing careful motions in the air. Some sprinkle holy water, droplets catching the light before disappearing against skin and cloth. For a moment, it feels significant, like something is happening. You look closely, searching for any sign of change, a hesitation in movement, a slowing of steps, anything that suggests the rhythm is breaking. But the dancing continues, uninterrupted. You notice the smallest details now. The way one dancer's foot drags slightly before lifting again. The way another's arms move less fluidly, more strained with each motion. The exhaustion is still there, the effort, the undeniable limits of the body pressing in from all sides. And yet, the movement does not stop. You feel a subtle shift in the air, not in the dancers, but in the people watching. The hope that was building begins to change shape. It does not disappear completely, but it becomes more cautious, more fragile. Because the ritual is happening and the result is not. You see one priest linger beside a dancer, repeating the blessing as if the repetition might strengthen its effect. His voice remains steady, but there is a slight tension now, a quiet urgency beneath the surface. You understand that feeling, the need for something to work, the need for this to be the moment where everything turns. But moments like that are rare, and this does not feel like one of them. You glance around at the others. Some continue to pray, their eyes closed, their focus inward. Others watch more closely now, their attention fixed on the dancers, measuring, waiting. The shrine remains unchanged, solid, still. A place built for reflection, for quiet, for resolution. And in the middle of it, the dancers move, relentless, unbroken. You feel a quiet realization settle into you, not sudden, not sharp, steady. The rituals are real, the belief is real. The intention is real. But whatever is happening here is not responding. You shift your weight slightly, grounding yourself again, feeling the stillness in your own body, the control that remains yours. You hold on to it, not tightly, but consciously. Because here, in this place of hope, the contrast is clearer than ever. Stillness exists, peace exists, but not for them. You watch one final time as the dancers continue, their movements unchanged, their bodies still caught in that endless cycle, and you feel something settle quietly in your chest. Not panic, not even fear, just understanding that sometimes, even in the places meant to heal, not everything can be fixed, and that is a truth that lingers long after the prayers have ended, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to end. The dancers tire, collapse, recover, or simply stop. There is no grand conclusion, no clear reason, just a gradual return to stillness. At first you're not even sure it is happening. You stand there, watching, as you have been for days, your eyes trained to follow the constant motion, the endless rhythm that has defined everything around you. Your mind expects continuity. It expects the next step, the next turn, the next movement. But something feels different, subtle, almost invisible. One dancer slows, not dramatically, not enough to draw immediate attention, just a slight hesitation between steps, a fraction of a second where the rhythm falters. You notice it only because you've been watching for so long, because your senses have adjusted to the pattern so completely that even the smallest change stands out. You lean forward slightly, waiting. The dancer continues. Allah, but slower now. The movements are less sharp, less driven. There is a heaviness to them, a resistance that was not there before. Then another. Across the space, someone else begins to lose the rhythm. Their steps drift out of sync, their body lagging behind whatever force has been driving it. You feel something shift in your chest, a quiet awareness that this might be the beginning of something. Not an end, but a change. You look around. The pattern is breaking. Not everywhere, not all at once, but in small pockets, scattered across the space like cracks forming in something that once felt solid. A dancer pauses, just for a moment, then resumes. But the pause lingers in your mind, because it should not have been possible, and yet it happened. You feel your breath slow slightly, sec, your body responding to the shift even before your mind fully processes it. The tension that has been sitting quietly in your chest begins to loosen, just a little, because for the first time there is interruption. You watch as one dancer stumbles and does not immediately recover. They remain still for a second longer than expected, then 2, then 3. The stillness grows, fragile but real, like something testing its own existence. You almost do not want to believe it, because believing it means expecting something. An expectation has not been rewarded so far, but the change continues, gradual, uneven, uncertain. Some dancers continue as before, their movements unchanged, their bodies still caught in the same relentless loop. But others begin to slow, their steps losing precision, their rhythm breaking apart. You notice the exhaustion more clearly now, not because it has increased, but because it is no longer hidden by motion. It is visible in the pauses, in the way bodies sag slightly when movement falters, in the way breath becomes deeper, heavier, more grounded. Human again. You realize something quietly. The motion has been masking the limits of the body, and now those limits are returning. You watch as one dancer finally stops, completely. Their feet remain planted, their body swaying slightly as if unsure what to do next. There's a moment of stillness, fragile and uncertain, like a balance that could tip either way. You hold your breath. They do not move, not again. The stillness holds, and something shifts in the air. Not relief, not yet, but possibility. You glance around, noticing others seeing it too. The subtle change in posture, the way people lean in slightly, their attention sharpening, their focus narrowing on those who have stopped. It spreads slowly, one by one, not like the dancing did, not sudden, not overwhelming, but steady, careful, as if the body's remembering something it had forgotten, how to stop. You feel it in yourself as well, that quiet recognition of stillness, of control, of something returning that should never have been lost. Your own body feels more solid, more certain, as if the shift around you reinforces the stability within you. You take a slow breath, in, out, still. You hold on to that. Because even as the dancing begins to fade, there is no clear reason why. No explanation that rises above the others. No moment where everything clicks into place. It simply lessens. and then lessens again, until what once filled the entire space becomes scattered, then rare, then almost gone. You stand there watching the final movements dissolve into stillness, feeling the weight of it settle into you. Because there is no conclusion, no lesson clearly stated, no answer given, only a return, a quiet, gradual return to something that feels familiar, and yet not entirely the same. Because once you have seen something like this, you do not forget it, even when it ends, and as the last of the dancers come to rest, their bodies finally still, their breathing slowing into something recognizable, you realize something that lingers longer than everything else. The dancing did not end all at once. It ended the way it began, quietly, uncertainly, and without ever fully explaining itself. The streets grow quieter, the music fades. Yeah, life resumes its familiar rhythm. And yet, something lingers, a memory, a question, because you lived through something that should not have happened. At first, the silence feels louder than the noise ever did. You step into the street one morning and notice it immediately. No movement, no rhythm, no scattered footsteps echoing against stone. Just the ordinary sounds of a city returning to itself. A cart rolling slowly over uneven ground. A distant voice calling out. The quiet shuffle of people going about their day. It feels unfamiliar. Not because it is new, but because it is normal. And normal has not been present for quite some time. You pause for a moment, letting the stillness settle around you. It feels almost fragile, like something that could break if you move too quickly or think too loudly. You half expect to hear it again. That faint, persistent rhythm returning from somewhere just out of sight. But it does not. The dancers are gone, or rather, they are no longer dancing. You see them now, here and there, moving through the city in ways that feel cautious, measured. Their steps are slower, more deliberate, as if each movement is being considered before it happens. There is a heaviness to them, not just physical, but something deeper, something that lingers beyond the body. You recognize one of them as they pass, not by their face, but by the way they walk, careful, aware, as if they no longer trust their own legs completely. You feel something shift in your chest as you watch them go. A quiet understanding, or perhaps just a shared awareness of what has happened. No words are exchanged, none are needed. Because how would you even begin to describe it? You notice how the city has changed in small ways, subtle things. The way people pause slightly longer before stepping into open spaces. The way conversations sometimes drift toward what happened, then stop abruptly, as if the subject itself is too uncertain to hold on to. It is not discussed openly, not in detail, but it is not forgotten either. It exists in the spaces between words, in the glances people exchange, in the quiet moments where someone hesitates just a little longer than necessary. You find yourself doing the same. You walk through the streets, following familiar paths, but everything feels slightly different now. Not because the city has changed, but because you have. You're more aware of your body, of your steps, of the simple act of standing still. Things that once required no thought now carry a quiet weight. Yeah, you stop for a moment, just to confirm it. Stillness. It comes easily, naturally, and yet it feels like something you should appreciate more than you used to. You take a slow breath, letting it out gently, feeling the calm settle into you. The tension that once lived quietly beneath everything has begun to fade, but it has not disappeared entirely. It has changed shape. You notice how life resumes around you, gradually, steadily. Markets reopen. Conversations grow longer. Laughter returns, though it feels softer at first, as if testing the space before fully settling in. The world continues, it always does. but continuation does not mean erasure. You hear someone mention the dancing in passing, their voice low, almost cautious. Another person responds with a brief nod, then changes the subject. The conversation moves on, but the moment lingers, because some things do not fit neatly into explanation. They resist it. They remain. You find yourself thinking about it more than you expected, not constantly, not obsessively, but in quiet moments, when you are alone, when the world is still, when your mind drifts without direction. It returns, not as fear, but as curiosity, as a question. What was it? The thought does not resolve. It does not need to. You look around at the city again, at the people moving through it, at the ordinary rhythm of life reasserting itself, and feel a quiet sense of balance returning. But beneath that balance, something else remains. Awareness. Because you have seen something that does not follow the rules you once relied on. Something that moved without reason, continued without permission, and ended without explanation. And that knowledge stays with you. You take another step forward, steady and controlled, your body responding exactly as it should. And for a moment, that is enough. Because after everything, the simple ability to stop feels like something worth holding on to. In the days that follow, people attempt to explain what occurred. Scholars, priests, physicians all offer their interpretations. You listen, nodding, but part of you knows the truth. Sometimes history does not explain itself. Sometimes it just dances. At first, the explanations feel necessary, almost urgent, as if the city itself cannot fully return to normal until someone, somewhere, puts this into words that make sense. You hear it in conversations that stretch longer than usual, in gatherings where people speak more carefully, more thoughtfully, as though choosing the right explanation might restore something that was unsettled. The physicians return to their theories, refining them now that the movement has stopped. They speak of heat, of blood, of imbalance. They adjust their language slightly, adding new observations, new confidence, as if time alone has made their ideas more complete. You listen politely, recognizing the effort behind it, the need to place this within a system. But the system still feels too small. The priests speak as well, their voices steady, their interpretations shaped by belief. They describe trials, divine will, forces that move beyond human understanding. Their explanations feel broader, more expansive, but no less uncertain. They offer meaning, not mechanics. And meaning, you realize, is what people are really searching for. You hear scholars discussing it in quieter tones, framing it as something collective, a shared experience, a kind of emotional contagion, though the words are different, less precise, more shaped by observation than certainty. They describe patterns, behaviours, the way one person becomes many. You think back to the moment when it spread, how subtle it was, how inevitable it felt once it began. You nod along, not because you fully agree, but because it sounds closer to something you experienced, something that does not rely on the body alone or on belief alone, but something in between. And yet, even that feels incomplete. You realize something slowly, over time. Each explanation captures a piece, but none capture the whole. You find yourself less interested in choosing the correct answer and more aware of the space between them. The gaps, the parts that remain unspoken, undefined, because those parts feel the most familiar, the most real. You walk through the city again, the same streets that once held that endless motion, now quiet, steady, predictable. And still your mind returns to it, not in panic, not in fear, but in reflection. You remember the sound, the rhythm, the way it filled everything. You remember the uncertainty, the way explanation shifted and changed, never quite settling into something solid. And you remember the moment it began to fade, without reason, without announcement, just as quietly as it started. That is the part that stays with you, because endings are supposed to have shape, cause and effect, a clear transition from one state to another. But this did not. It simply lessened until it was gone. You stop walking for a moment, then standing still in the middle of a familiar street, letting that thought settle. Stillness. You notice it again, the same way you did before, but now with a different understanding. It is not just the absence of movement, it is something active, something maintained, something that for a time was not guaranteed. You take a slow breath, in, out. You're aware of your body again, but not in the same way as before, not with tension, not with uncertainty, but with appreciation, a quiet acknowledgement of something that once felt automatic. You can stop. That simple truth carries more weight now. You glance around at the people moving through the city, each one carrying their own version of what happened, their own interpretation, their own quiet understanding. No two are exactly the same, and that feels appropriate somehow. Because whatever this was, it was not simple, it was not singular, it was not easily explained. You resume walking, your steps steady, your pace unhurried, and let the questions remain where they are, unanswered, unresolved, and perhaps that is enough, because not everything needs to be explained to be understood. Some things are meant to be experienced, to be remembered, to exist as a reminder that the world does not always follow the patterns you expect. You take one final glance down at your feet as you walk, moving, stopping, exactly when you choose, and that quiet control, that simple, ordinary ability feels like something you will never take for granted again. Because sometimes, history does not teach you with answers. Sometimes, it teaches you with questions that never quite stop moving. It does not happen all at once. There is no single moment where you wake up and everything feels completely normal again. Instead, it arrives quietly, in small, almost forgettable pieces. A step taken without thinking, a pause that feels effortless, a moment where your body moves and you do not question it. At first you do not even notice. You wake up, stretch slightly and sit up. Your legs move as expected, your arms follow. There is no hesitation, no second thought, just motion, simple and unremarkable. You stand, place your feet on the ground and take a step forward, and then another. Nothing happens, no lingering rhythm, no strange pull, no quiet voice in the back of your mind asking if you'll be able to stop. You just stop. It's such a small thing that it almost feels ridiculous to notice it, but you do, because for a time, a stopping was not something you could assume. It was something you watched others lose, something you quietly tested in yourself again and again. Now it happens without effort, without awareness. You walk outside, letting the morning air settle around you. It feels lighter than it did before, though nothing about it has changed. The sky looks the same, the streets carry the same sounds. People move as they always have, but you feel different within it. You take a few steps, then pause near the edge of the street. Not because you have to, just because you can. Your body responds immediately, holding still without resistance, without that subtle tension that used to sit beneath everything. You stand there for a moment longer than necessary, just to be sure. Stillness holds. You let out a slow breath, and not realizing until now how much you had been holding on to something. Not fear exactly, but awareness. constant quiet awareness of movement, of control, of the possibility that something might slip. That awareness is fading now. You notice it in the way your thoughts drift more easily. They are no longer anchored to your body, no longer circling back to the same question. Am I still in control? You do not need to ask any more. You glance down at your feet as you begin walking again, watching them move out of habit rather than concern. They respond exactly as they should, lifting and landing with a rhythm that belongs to you, not something outside of you. There is comfort in that, a quiet, steady comfort that settles into your chest. You pass by others in the street, and for the first time in a while, you're not observing them for signs of something unusual. You're not scanning for movement that does not belong. You're simply passing by. It feels ordinary, and that ordinariness feels new. You realize how much of your attention had been pulled outward, focused on what might happen, on what you were witnessing, on what you might become part of. Now that attention returns to you, to your own experience, to the simple act of existing without constant awareness. You stop again, just briefly, letting yourself feel it. Stillness, effortless. You do not need to hold on to it. It holds itself. You smile slightly, not in a dramatic way, just a small acknowledgement of something regained, something you never thought to value before it was uncertain. Control. You take another step, then another, moving through the street with a calm you did not realize you'd lost. Your body feels lighter, not physically, but in the way it responds, in the absence of resistance, in the quiet trust that has returned. You realize something gently. Your body was always yours, but for a time, it didn't feel like it. And now, as you walk without thinking, as you stop without effort, as you breathe without noticing, that feeling returns, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. And this time, you notice it. Because once something has been uncertain, its return feels like something worth remembering. Even as life returns to normal, something small stays with you, not loud, not overwhelming, but present. A quiet awareness that something like this happened once, and could, in some way, happen again. It does not arrive as panic. It is not the kind of fear that makes your heart race or your breath shorten. It is quieter than that, softer. It lives in the background like a thought you do not actively follow, but cannot fully ignore. You notice it in small moments, when you stand still a little longer than usual, when you catch yourself listening to your own footsteps, when a rhythm lingers in your mind just a second too long. It is not enough to disturb your day, but it is enough to be there. You walk through the streets, moving as you always have, your body steady, your pace controlled. Everything feels normal. It is normal. And yet, every so often, there is a flicker of awareness that was not there before. A question, not spoken, not fully formed, just present. You test it without meaning to. You stop. Not abruptly, not in a way anyone else would notice. Just a natural pause in your movement. You stand there, letting your body settle, letting stillness take over, and it does. Easily, completely. Nothing pulls you forward, nothing continues without your permission. You nod slightly, as if confirming something you already knew. And yet, the act of confirming it has become part of your routine. Not constant, not obsessive, just occasional. You realize this is what remains, not the event itself, but the memory of losing certainty. Because before, you never questioned your ability to stop. It was automatic, invisible, something that did not require attention. Now, it has weight. Not heavy, but noticeable. You pass by a group of people laughing, their conversation light, their movements easy. You watch them for a moment, noticing how natural it all looks, the way they shift, turn, gesture, dampikiand, all without thought. It reminds you of how things used to feel, and how they feel again. But the difference is, now you are aware of it, you continue walking, your steps steady, your breathing even. The city moves around you in its familiar rhythm, the ordinary patterns of life re-establishing themselves fully. There is comfort in that, a sense of stability that grows stronger with each passing day. And still, the awareness lingers. You hear a distant sound, a repetitive tapping, and for just a moment your attention sharpens. Your body responds before your mind does, a brief moment of alertness, of listening. Then you recognize it, a craftsman working, a hammer against wood. Normal. You relax again, the tension fading as quickly as it arrived. You almost smile at yourself, at how quickly your mind tried to connect something ordinary to something that no longer exists. But that is how memory works. It leaves traces, patterns, connections that do not always make sense but remain anyway. You slow your pace slightly, letting your thoughts drift. You're not afraid, not really, but you are aware, in a way that feels both unnecessary and impossible to fully undo. You realise something quietly. The experience did not just pass through you, it stayed. Not as something overwhelming, but as something subtle, a shift. A slight adjustment in how you perceive control, movement, certainty. You stop one more time, just briefly, feeling the ground beneath your feet, the stillness settling naturally into your body. You do not question it this time, you do not test it, you simply accept it. Because the fear, if it can be called that, is not about what is happening now, it is about what once happened, and the knowledge that it did. You take a slow breath, letting it out gently, your body calm, your mind steady. And you understand something in that moment. The dancing is over, the movement has ended, but the awareness, that stays. Not to disturb you, not to control you, but to remind you that even the most ordinary things are not always guaranteed. At some point, without fully realizing when it began, you find yourself feeling something unexpected. Not relief exactly, not happiness, but a quiet, steady gratitude for things you never used to think about. Small things, ordinary things, the kind of things that once passed unnoticed. It starts with something simple. You wake up, and nothing is wrong. No sounds outside that shouldn't be there. No strange rhythm pulling at your thoughts. No lingering tension waiting for something to begin again. Just the quiet, familiar start of a normal day. You lie there for a moment longer than usual, not because you have to, but because you can. Your body is still, completely still, and it stays that way without effort, without attention. It does not require you to think about it, to maintain it, to question it. It simply is. You sit up slowly, your movements unremarkable, predictable. Your feet touch the ground, and for a brief second you notice the contact more clearly than you once would have. The firmness of the floor, the stability, the quiet agreement between your body and the world beneath it. You stand, and nothing else happens. No continuation, no second motion, just stillness when you choose it. You step forward, then stop again, just to feel it one more time, not out of fear, not out of doubt, but out of appreciation. You realize how strange that is, to appreciate stopping, to notice it, to value something so basic that it never once crossed your mind before all of this. You walk outside, the morning air soft against your skin, the city moving around you in its usual rhythm. People pass by, their movements easy, unthinking. You see it now in a different way, the casual nature of it, the effortless control. You notice a man adjusting his stance as he speaks, a woman pausing mid-step to turn and respond to someone. A child starting and stopping without hesitation, their movements quick, fluid, unquestioned. It all feels remarkable, not because it is unusual, but because it is normal. And normal, you've learned, is something you can lose. That thought does not bring fear this time, it brings perspective. You continue walking, your pace steady, your body responding exactly as it should. There is no tension beneath it now, no constant checking, no quiet question waiting in the background, just movement and the ability to end it. You take a slow breath, feeling it fill your lungs, then leave just as easily. Even that feels different now, not because the act has changed, but because your awareness of it has. You are aware of how easily it happens, how little effort it requires, how much you once ignored it. You pass by a familiar street, one that once held that endless motion, that constant, exhausting rhythm. Now it is quiet, still, ordinary. You stop there for a moment, not out of habit, not out of concern, but out of reflection. You remember what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it felt like to stand there unsure, watching something that did not follow the rules you understood. And then you look at it now, empty, calm, unremarkable. You feel something settle in your chest, not relief, something softer, gratitude. Because the absence of that experience is not something you expected to feel so strongly. You assumed things would simply return to normal and that would be enough. But it is more than enough. It is something you now notice, something you now value. You take another step forward, leaving the space behind, your body moving with quiet certainty, your mind calm, your awareness gentle. You do not need to think about your movements anymore, but sometimes you choose to, just for a moment, just to remind yourself that control is not something you should assume. It is something you are fortunate to have, and as you continue walking, your steps steady, your breathing even, your body entirely your own, you realize something that stays with you long after everything else fades. The strangest part of surviving something like this is not the fear it leaves behind. It is the quiet appreciation for everything that didn't happen today. As the night settles in and your thoughts begin to slow, you find yourself drifting gently away from the streets of Strasbourg, away from the heat, the noise, the endless rhythm of footsteps that refuse to stop. You made it through the day, a very strange day, a day where your body was no longer something you could take for granted, where people danced not for joy, not for celebration, but because they simply could not stop, where music made things worse, doctors guessed, priests prayed, and everyone quietly wondered if they might be next. And yet, here you are, still, breathing calmly, your body listening to you again. There's something oddly comforting in that, isn't there? Because when you really think about it, most of your life is made up of small, invisible victories, the ability to sit, to stand, to walk across a room and decide at any moment to stop. No audience, no effort, no fear that your own feet might betray you. Back then, that was not guaranteed. People endured something they could not explain, something that blurred the line between body and mind, between choice and compulsion. And still, somehow, they made it through. Some rested, some recovered, some simply stopped one day, without ever knowing why. History is full of moments like that. Strange, uncomfortable, a little absurd, but also deeply human. Because even in confusion, people tried to help each other. They brought water, they stayed close, they whispered prayers. They did what they could, even when they didn't understand what was happening. And maybe that's the part worth holding on to. Not just the mystery, but the resilience. So tonight, as you lie in your bed, in a quiet room, with no drums in the distance and no strange rhythm pulling at your legs, Take a moment to notice that. Your body is still, your breathing is slow, your mind is finally allowed to rest, and that simple stillness is something people once would have given anything for, so let it settle in. Let your thoughts drift. Let your body sink deeper into the comfort beneath you. Because history may be strange and sometimes unsettling, but it also reminds you of something simple. You made it to a time where you can stop, and that's a pretty good place to be. Good night.